When I set off for the planet of Fulgora, I didn't expect myself to get stranded midway between there and here. One of my biggest fears is to be stranded alone in the middle of nowhere, which is exactly where we left off last time. And although the endless vacuum of space may be comfortable to others, for me I would rather be anywhere else. Currently, due to my poorly designed space platform, I am stranded without fuel or power because unfortunately, I thought using lasers would be the best way to protect my space platform from asteroid. And although hypothetically lasers should work, there's two big problems with that. They take a lot of power and they don't do any damage to the asteroid. So obviously that one decision single-handedly consumed all of my electricity, draining it anytime I have to shoot an asteroid, which is a lot. I mean, look at these lasers. It's pathetic from the lack of damage, and even worse is the ship powers down entirely. Unfortunately, I do not have the materials I need to fix this problem from here. I'm just lucky that we're closer to Fulgora than we are to Novice, so we will start drifting to Fulgora eventually, no matter how long it may take. And once I finally got there, I dropped down and immediately started changing the ship to reduce power, and started making ammunition for the turrets to work. Goodbye, beacons. It was nice while it lasted. Now, this is my first planet I've gone to outside of the starting planet of Novice, so I have little to no idea what I was getting in. When I dropped down, I was once again stranded in the middle of an oil ocean. I sent down whatever materials I had and just began to build a base. There's a few things about Fulgora that makes it entirely unique to Novice. One of the unique things is that the nodes of material you have are scrap piles. That's it. You don't have iron, you don't have copper, you don't have uranium, you've got nothing else. Just scrap. You can mine scrap like normal. That's not a problem. The issue is refining it. You can't just shove it into an assembler and make it do stuff. You have to shove it into a recycler first, which will then break it down into one of a random component, and it's on a percentage-based scale. But you then have to either harness those random components or continue breaking them down to get your base materials. With that information, I felt pretty good that where I had landed, there is a very large patch with a couple million scrap within it. So I tried to set up the miners that I brought from Novice, and then realized that the power poles can't go across oil oceans. And conveniently, it's way too long for me to use either long power poles or the short ones. And if you were wondering if I had set up a small base on a nearby island, then the answer would be yes. I set up recyclers and a base, and I put lightning collectors everywhere just to get a start, just to know that it's useless, so I had to tear it all down. And I peeked further down the tech tree to see if there's ever a point where I can build on the oil ocean, and yes, there is, but I'd have to go to Volcanus and Gleba just to get that technology. And I'm not going to switch to the other two planets just to solve this one, so instead I ran to a new island with resource patches on the island and big enough to house everything I needed to. And while I was looking for this island, I ended up exploring quite a bit around my spawn point on Fulgora, found two more patches with a couple million in them, but again, they were too far from an island for me to do anything with them. So I settled on a medium-sized patch with about 1 million in total of scrap between two different resource nodes. Now class, if you were paying attention, I did mention that all of the oceans are made of oil. So power on Fulgora is going to be a bit of an issue because not only do I not have a free access to water, but solar panels here are like 5% efficient. I think it's actually 20%, but still not nearly enough with the lack of island space and the lack of power pole connectivity. I'd have to have like 3 islands and I can't even connect them with the long enough power pole, which is where lightning comes in. Fulgora doesn't have much, but it does have a very electromagnetic atmosphere, which just means there's a boatload of lightning all over the place. And yes, it hurts to get struck. However, you can learn pretty quickly how to make lightning collectors from the scrap material that you gain. And in using those, you can pair them with accumulators to store and harness power, because otherwise it would only ever work when a lightning storm is happening overhead, which only happens for like 10, maybe 15 seconds. Which means while I was looking for an island, I also had to look for a spot with enough space to house the accumulators that I needed to store the power. So luckily, I had found a perfect island for this, had enough room for the accumulators because there was a small island within power pole range that I could just fill with accumulators. So that helped massively. The next issue to try and set up was recyclers. I have no idea how to set these up, but my first idea was to have them spit out whatever material and then to feed back into the system to give me the most base materials, and then I could start building from there. And the main problem was that no matter how many recyclers I put onto the belt, eventually it would become jammed up and just stop the entire operation altogether. So I scrapped that idea and decided to just start pulling resources off the belt once they're created. I could then put any sort of excess material back onto that belt to be recycled later. It should stop the jamming because there's much less coming through the belt. Oddly enough, the first production I had to make was actually brick production because all of the recyclers were made from bricks. Once I had enough material to feel like I had that sorted and that it was working properly, I decided to start oil refining. Now, arguably this could have waited and I could have saved this space. However, there are a few things I specifically need light oil for, and I'll need sulfur later, so might as well get the petroleum started as well. And the reason I won't use it too much is because my use of plastic, which would mostly be for circuits, is highly reduced because most of those materials just come right out of the recycler and they come in bulk much faster than I could produce on my limited space. I got to cracking and then I went ahead and looked at the amount of materials I set up, and I noticed that I actually got one of the resources I need to make Fulgoran science, homium. Homium is highly specific to Fulgora. It's the only place you could collect and get homium ore. However, once you make that, you can make superconductors and super batteries or whatever. You can also make electrolyte, which is all used in creating Fulgora electromagnetic science. And of course, you can't create any of these in either a chemical plant or inside of an assembler. No. You have to use a new tool, an electromagnetic tool, to even start to process those things and then shove them into the science. However, I can't focus on that right now because if you remember correctly, my ship is being bombarded by asteroids above me and I need to get a mall up and running as soon as possible so that I could start making a cargo bay as well as a landing pad and send up materials to fix my ship. And as much as I love being here, I don't. So I go ahead and make the rocket fuel, which is what I needed the light oil for. And then I go ahead and start to create and gather the rest of the resources for a cargo bay. And while I'm at it, I go ahead and set up a mall. Luckily, I had bots that I brought from Novice, so it made this whole process so much easier. I didn't have to worry about belts, nothing, just requester chests and provider chests, which thankfully I had that system because I don't think I would have nearly enough room to be belting everything across this tiny little island.
Go like and subscribe.
And just like that, I had the beginning of a mall. So most of the reason I need this mall is so that when I am off planet, if anything breaks or I need to add something, this is here so that I can have the bots just do the work for me. One of the other resources that I get from recycling is ice, which I can turn into water. Now we need water for a couple of crafts. However, I can use it for steam power because we have way more than I'll ever need. And it's not a foolproof plan because if the accumulators and lightning go down, the steam power will only last for like maybe 10 seconds before they go down too because there's no ice being melted. However, after doing that, I felt confident enough to set up the rest of the mall, which included space platforms, turrets, everything else I needed to fix the ship above me. And I finally made enough concrete that I put together the cargo bay to send all of those resources up. What's nice about having to fuel the cargo bay is the only thing I had to craft was really the rocket fuel, because blue circuits and LDSs are made from recycling. It's really easy, so nice. Once my ship was repaired and everything was fixed and there's enough stockpile for me to send up, I sent up whatever science I have and ran it back to Novice for a test run of the new turrets. Now, it isn't perfect because the ammunition is not running on a belt fast enough. The way that I've designed my base is that I have one side of the belt, which is running around the entirety of this ship, house the ores, where everything that refines the ores pulls from that belt. And then on the outside of the belt, I have ammunition pulling where the turrets will pull from. So both sides of the one belt are being used to its fullest. To state it plainly, I'm not creating enough ammo to fill out the belt. Although, even with that complication, I was able to get that ship back and forth with little to no issue. The next problem I had to deal with was that the scrap on the island I chose is now depleted. Or at least we're on the final dregs of it, so I decide it's time to make a train station to go to those 3 resource nodes I saw with millions of scrap. Hopefully that'll be more than enough that I'll ever need for Fulgora. Couple of quirks if you're ever hoping to build a train station on Fulgora. First and foremost, you need elevated rails because the oil oceans will not let you build normal rails on top of them. Shocker. However, another caveat to this, there are 2 parts of the oil ocean, deep oil and shallow oil. You can only place the pillars on the shallow oil. So hopefully you have a route that you can get through from one side to another. And it took a little bit of finagling, but eventually I did find spots where I could get to the 3 nodes I needed. Second quirk, arguably a more important one, is that they have to have their own set of power because they can't feed off of your power. Again, it's the whole my power poles can't go too far issue. Now, in my train set I have made back on my main base in Novice, I ended up using a weird set of interrupts to actually have the trains take resource from place to base. Here, it's all scrap, so I don't really care. I have a 2-way train. It has a head on each side. It'll run to the scrap, pick up, run back, and then I'll set up a system where the trains will stop if there's anyone in the load-off port or unload port, and then they will fill the gap when it is open. And since I'm already producing rocket fuel for the rockets, might as well feed that into the trains too. It'll make them last longer and go faster. With that, I had a couple more redesigns. I decided that the science I was making was not quite enough, so I tried to make 4 production of science, like 4 bases, electromagnetic converters, of just science, and then feeding backwards to fill all 4 of those with all the resources they would need. I also added more accumulators and changed the position of where the steam engines were so that I could make room for another set of recyclers, because with the trains coming in, I now have more than enough resources to actually fill 2 packs of recyclers. So I just blueprinted what I had, copied, pasted it over in the other spot. Also, at some point, I made a space station specifically dedicated for electromagnetic science, so that way I'm not using Skipper, which is my main space station. And with that, I pretty much have everything I need from Fulgora. However, I decided to research some sciences to make, for example, my lightning collectors 20% better, from 20% efficiency all the way up to 40% efficiency. I'll take it. That's way better on the accumulators. So I decided to head back to Novice for like a split second because I realized one of the things I could make was quality 3 modules. The problem is they can't actually be made on Novice. They have to be made on Fulgora. So I used up whatever little space I had left to start making the quality chips. And I now have that running, but I have it running in a way that it's actually attempting to increase the quality of the quality chips so that once I place them into the malls, it'll end up being way more efficient at giving me higher quality items. I said quality like 10 times in a row. It just improves the stats of them. It is really nice and needed for late game, and it can absolutely help fix my turret issue. With the quality modules set up, the trains set up, my recyclers created and set up, I am now ready to move off planet and head back to Novice. A couple of things that I am shuttling back and forth between Novice and Fulgora. I actually have to make recyclers on Fulgora, but I can use them on Novice, so I'm having them come back so that I can create quality machines that recycle the lower quality items on Novice itself, which I'm really excited for. But that's a later adventure. I'll also have it send me quality modules eventually, as well as blue and red chips whenever they're in surplus, as of course, including the science. So I will have science chips and modules being sent back and forth. When I got back to Novice, I was a very short homecoming because I've realized the next thing I need to do is get more oil. So after looking at my trains and seeing that a lot of them had depleted either to my flamethrowers or to the bugs themselves, I replaced a lot of the trains, collected materials on Skipper to go to the next planet, which is either going to be Volcanus or Gleba. So instead of dealing with the biters here, I'm going to go out and figure out how to deal with starting life anew on one of those planets. Leave a comment down below to guess where I'm headed to next. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. Please leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all in the next one. Bye.